Well, welcome. I'm Doug Holder. I'm here, poet to poet, writer to writer, and with our friend, my friend Paul Stephen Stone, who is a novelist among other things, and is the author of How to Train a Rock, or So It Seems, and other books, and is a new book out, Souljourner, a novel, which is best described as a karmic crimes uh, story. Um, and Paul has had a creative life. He's the former director of W.P. Mason, and you see those guys with the prominent mustaches on the trucks. Well, he was behind that whole concept. Um, so, welcome, Paul. How are you? Okay.
Very good. Thank you, Doug. Good to be here. This is kind of like a flashback. How many years ago did we do an interview on the show?
Quite a few, Paul.
Yeah,
Quite a few.
10 years at least.
Yeah. Now, I know you personally, and also in your books, you have a decidedly spiritual bent. You grew up Jewish in the Bronx, but your writing is strongly influenced by, how should I say, Eastern religion. How did that
I
come?
think that's appropriate. Yeah.
Well, maybe you can comment on it.
Oh, no.
You grew up Jewish in the Bronx, and
Right. Well, I had a 13-year period where I was going to a school of self-development. It was in Boston, but it was I would say it was more based on Hindu point of view than Eastern philosophy, and it was connected to a Hindu holy man in India. So there was a lot of information that came in and helped shape my spiritual worldview.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and so
And
you may
I started writing novels. When I started writing novels,
obviously your Jewish heritage didn't do it for you, right? Your Jewish religion didn't do it for you spiritually.
No, I don't know about you, but I went to Hebrew school and I hated it. I felt I had to do it until I got bar mitzvahed. I read the Aliyah in the temple, and I have no idea what I said. So there was a lot of it. It was hollow for me as a kid. There wasn't much there. So I was surprised when I found myself interested in spiritual matters, to be honest with you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, your protagonist, he's a 68-year-old convicted prisoner who goes through a spiritual journey that is often destructive. Why did you choose to use a prisoner for this? That's an interesting as a character.
Well, it wasn't a matter of using a prisoner, but it was a matter of having a character that was so controlled and overwhelmed by his vicious ex-wife's energy.
Blossom, that was?
Yeah. Blossom, yes. Yeah. Rostov, Rosa Rostov. So I didn't choose. That's just where he ended up. I have no idea. I didn't have an idea when I began it. He just was in prison. The way I write is not to figure everything out, but to see where the characters take me. And this was a very interesting journey. But when I started out, there are chapters that are basically other voices interwoven with the narrators. Do you recall?
Yeah.
And I had no idea why they were breaking into the narrative. I had no idea what the explanation would be. And at some point in the process, it all made sense. I mean, that takes a lot of faith, quite honestly. And I'm struggling with that now. Go ahead.
Is Blossom I mean, I know of your past. Is Blossom based on any of your past loves or wives or anything like that?
No, actually, I'm a little more removed than that. I had a friend that went through a divorce like no other divorce, with a soon-to-be ex-wife that was just basically kind of a witch. The energy was so bad that she represented that it struck me that this had to be a karmic relationship, that somebody comes and affects your life this way has to basically be there because of karma. So that gave me the idea for the book. I believe in reincarnation. I believe that there are souljourners. We're all just here. Each time we're here, we're a souljourner. And it just set up an interesting idea that is all embodied in that first sentence in the book. This is a warning from the previous incarnation of your soul, which I think is possible. You could certainly write a book if you believe in reincarnation to your next Souljourner.
Maybe I will. I'm just going to write myself a letter, as the song goes. Uh, yeah, so this is described as, I saw it described as a letter disguised as a novel. I mean,
right. The character kind of sets up this dichotomy at the very beginning, because the truth is he sees it as a letter to the next incarnation of his soul, trying to warn him about a spirit that is out to get them, so to speak. But at the same time, it's a novel, and it sells as a novel. If somebody picks it up in a future period, it'll be as a novel. So that's just the vehicle he chose to reach his next, the next Souljourner down the line.
These groups of people are in a sort of pod. Could you describe,
Yeah.
Blossom? Yeah. What is that?
Well, that's really my concept. A lot of this is spiritual stuff that I kind of intuit. I don't necessarily even know about it, but just so the idea, I basically believe that we have people in our lives who are familiar to us. We don't recognize them each time they appear, but periodically they appear in our lives and we appear in their lives. So I described it as, imagine it as a rocket ship with a pod of people in it going from one life to the next, only there is no rocket ship. I mean, the workings of karma are fascinating, because if karma is real and it has the kind of impact that we are told it has, then everything is connected to everything else. That all the stuff around us serves karma. I had a car accident. There was a pretty bad accident 3 years ago, and I got out of it, untouched, thankfully. And I felt like, in some ways, my guides and my karmic balance didn't want to see me in a bad accident, even though I had the makings of a bad accident.
Mm-hmm. Now, I think in a previous interview we discussed you had once had a vision of your own past life. Is that true?
Oh, that was a session I took with a woman who had studied in the tradition of this fellow Michael Newton, who teaches about a realm where spirits go between lives. And so it's life between lives is the basic idea. And this woman was trained by Michael Newton, or by his foundation, to help one journey, basically a journey to the end of your previous life. And they do that with not hypnosis, but it's basically a hypnotic process. And before I went to see this woman, I was just really curious. I had a session with another spiritual channel who had told me through a medium that I had previously probably been lynched. And that information, it struck me that if I wasn't careful, I could easily impose that on what we were about to go through. And so for 3.5 hours, she couldn't get me to go back to the end of my previous life. We stopped and talked, and I explained about this problem that I have. And we went back to it, and almost instantly I was transported back to what I think was probably the end of my last life. And I saw it as two images, two photographic images, heavily imbued in a kind of an amber glow. And one picture was a fellow being lynched, and he had a sign on his chest, NIGGAH. And the other view was from his point of view, looking out at the crowd. And it all seemed very strangely healing. It was almost as though I went back to heal that terrible trauma in my soul's background. So yes, that's my my brief touch with my previous life.
Paul, you're an eclectic sort of fellow, and you do have a children's book out now.
I do.
Maybe you could talk a bit about that.
Okay, this past year has been a great. It's almost as though the past has come back and echoed. The book that you're talking about, The Wind's Tale, which is actually officially published tomorrow, released, is a story that I wrote 40 some odd years ago. It was written as a children's book, but I was basically going off to an interview. I was working. I was a freelance writer at the time, and I was doing work for children's publishing, textbook publishing. And before I went to a meeting, this story just jumped out on the page. I didn't know where it came from. I hadn't thought any of it out. I just was given it, and I spit it out on paper. Maybe 7, 8 years later, I found this artist, and she illustrated it for me. And she's the lady who drew painted those pictures, and she's so talented. And so this is 40 some odd years later. I was actually looking for a publisher for another book I had written, and I saw this publisher, iFrig Publishing, who really their total focus is children's books that empower children. And so there's a real kind of point of view in this book that I think is meant for a lot of an audience that doesn't speak for itself. Let's put it that way. Kids who can't speak and can't really control much of their world. So
now, maybe you can read us a very brief passage from your new book. Is that possible?
Sure. From which one?
The new one, not the children's book, the one we're discussing today.
Okay.
Souljourner.
Let me get a copy. I have a copy here. Oh, here. See, this is not rehearsed. I didn't choose any segments. Why don't I just start from the beginning? Because
a brief passage from the beginning. Yeah.
Okay. And there is I dedicated the book to the Beatles, and with heartfelt thanks and undying affection, you rocked my world. We are not human beings on a spiritual journey. We are spiritual beings on a human journey. Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. Part 1, help. Well, actually, I should do the prologue. Sorry, I do not mean to confuse you. I originally wrote a 5-page prologue to appear here, but Sam strongly opposed it, suggesting instead that I make it brief and skip the poetry. Since I doubt I can write this book without Sam's assistance, you will certainly understand why I choose to follow his counsel. Sam is my muse, of course. Sam the Muse. One of a helpful band of house spirits I call my gang of guides. More later about guides and sundry spirits. But for now, allow me to continue with our story.
Well, thank you, Paul, for coming on Poet to Poet. Can you tell us where we can purchase the book?
At the moment, you can only get it on Amazon. Both books are on Amazon. You can also go to the publisher, which is FahrenheitPress.com, and you could buy it there. And you could also get The Wind's Tale from God, I forgot. Elfrag Press. Sorry.
That's in England, right? Yeah.
No, iFrig Press. EIFRIG. No, it's actually an American publisher.
Oh, okay. So your other book is,
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you for being on Poet to Poet, Writer to Writer.
Thank you for having me, Doug.